talk with you today a little bit about how we can change your organization one code review at a time. But actually, we are not going to be really talking about code review that much. Let me ask you a question. How many of you know this man? Raise your hand, and I'll be asking questions, so it would be great if you could raise your hands from time to time. How many of you know this man? Nobody. So that's Taiichi Ono, the person responsible for Lean and Toyota Production Systems. That's the person that all of the things that we are talking here is one of the giants that the Agile stands on. We stand on the shoulder of this man. So he is responsible for all of your Lean stuff, all of your quality stuff, the Kanban things, that's him. The interesting story about him is that he was working for Toyota building cars, and American car manufacturers like from Detroit, like basically Ford and GM, wanted to see why he was so successful. And he invited them in. He invited them to his own factory, and he showed them every single thing. He even showed them how to do certain stuff, like removing waste, like doing Kanban. The interesting thing, the car manufacturers from US went back home, started implementing what he told them, and they never succeeded. Why? They focused on the tools and the solutions that he gave them, rather than the way he thought about this. And that's going to be the theme of this talk. How many of you knows this company? Okay, in 2014, a normal Agile coach showed up at a conference like this and started talking about Spotify model. How many of you know about Spotify model? Okay, there's one person at the back. This is going to be an interesting crowd too. So Spotify model is everything about the tribes and how Spotify organized their scale, which means how to build organizations when they were growing extremely quickly. And interestingly enough, thousands of organizations after this presentation started building exactly the same things as Spotify did. And what actually happened, not many of them succeeded. I wanted to ask how many of you succeeded, but because none of you really done this, the thing is, none of them were Spotify. All of them were having a different context and a different starting position. So it was really, really difficult. How many of you know Kent Beck? No? Okay. So Kent Beck is the creator of XP, Extreme Programming. And he basically speaking said that the model that Spotify shown was not even used by Spotify to become Spotify. They got to it by their own culture and how they were doing things and how they were thinking about the processes within their organization to become that. So my theme to you is, don't just take whatever anyone at this conference will tell you, take it by heart, go to your organization on Monday and say, hey, Pawel told this is awesome, let's do it. Like, your context matters, okay? Your organization is probably different than mine. Your developers are different than mine. Your starting point is different than ours. So don't do that. And one advice is, whatever you hear today, just follow Steve Jobs. Stay hungry, stay foolish. Just follow up the advice of people who will be sharing their knowledge today, but remember about your own context. Don't try to make it exact what they kind of told you. And what we're going to try to do today is try to share a certain amount of thinking that went into what we end up having, rather than say to you, hey, do this. This is the tool that you should use, and everything is going to be great. So let's start. Okay. How many of you believes that you are here to make your development teams more productive? Can we raise the hands? Unless you don't believe that. Okay? How many of you think that you're here because you want to make your team and your developers more effective in impacting the business? Okay? Okay, that's fine. I think that the word productivity is, generally speaking, very, very poorly used, and I don't think so that we want to be producing more code, more capabilities, more bugs, more late night deploys, more staying overnights, and so on and so on. I think that where the current focus is going is towards the effectiveness of actually making an impact of something that we build. So what I want to say is that your beautiful code, all of the things that you build, kind of matters less. What really matters is that the actual sales on the platform that you just built are happening, that your users are happy, that something that you were supposed to deliver as the objective of the project is actually happening. The fact that you wrote it in the latest library, whatever that is much less relevant. But at the same time, I know you could be suspicious because I'm not asking you to do scrappy coding, just things to throw away, just type faster, be more productive, but actually deliver really, really bad stuff. On the contrary, I want you to care a lot. I want you to think about your job as the crucial aspect of delivering this efficiency. I would just make a case for what could become a way to deliver this efficiency. So, this is going to be a tricky question. How many of you is a Scrum Master here? Developer? Okay, great that you guys came. Any other roles we've got in the room? Product managers. Okay, that's awesome. Do you know any things that you currently do within your organization or within your team that is counterproductive but effective? So think about all of those moments when you spoke about introducing something to your team and your manager said, but he's going to be doing double the time, or this is going to cost us more money. Do you know any of things that could be counterproductive in that definition? No?
From a developer's perspective, like sometimes we rewrite code, we refactor. Like
sure. So refactoring is one of those things, yeah. Anyone here does test-driven development? So writing tests before you actually write the code, which means you write code to test the code that you're going to write later. That doesn't sound very productive. You write almost the same code twice. What about people doing user research? Oh, I know what I want to build. Why do you do user research? That sounds like counterproductive as well. What about pair programming? How many of you does pair programming? Okay, that sounds like crazy counterproductive. One keyboard, two smart people in front of one screen, only one can type. That sounds bad. Well, how many of you knows XP? Extreme Programming, Kent Beck. So those are all of the things that Kent Beck suggested that we really should be doing. And there's plenty of superbly important stuff that XP is part of the Agile methodology that we do as the community that are here. Anything from pair programming, test-driven development, continuous integration, small releases, and so on. The more I look at this diagram, the more I think Kent Beck never really liked productivity. He really wanted to make an impact. Almost none of those things makes you more productive, but they make you more impactful on what you do. And I want to discuss one more, and today we're going to focus on that. How many of you, and I know you guys do code review in your organization, but how many of other people who are here in the room do code review? Anybody? No? Wow, this is going to be fun. So that's the typical metric of how a good code review looks like. The more what the hell moments you've got, the worse the code actually is. Okay, so none of you does code review, but I'll ask my team then. Do you like doing code review?
Yes.
Okay, so that's as skewed as it gets. They're not allowed to answer any other way. And then the other question is, do you do code review? Do you guys do code review at all?
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't like it?
No, I like it. I do code review.
Okay, so the first question, do you like doing code review? Raise your hand, please.
Okay.
If you like it. Okay, there are some people there. Do you do code review? So everybody who liked it should still raise their hand, and then everybody who doesn't like doing code review should raise their hand as well. Fair enough? Okay, so do you do code review?
Yes.
Okay, so it's usually like that. Most of the people who raise, or like some people will raise their hand here, but not many people will raise their hand here. And there's definitely a challenge with how we do code review. Why we do it, and I think this is crucial for most of you. So there was a survey done for, I think, more than 1,000 teams through multiple industries, multiple team sizes from very, very small to very, very big. And 90% of those people who are surveyed said that it's the easiest way and the best way to improve the code quality. 73% of them said it's for sharing the knowledge, adherence to the coding standards, and mentoring less experienced colleagues. So the benefits are there. Somehow, like if I will read you this and I'll go to your CEO and say, hey, would you like that? Almost everybody will say, yeah, of course I want that. But somehow it doesn't really work that well. And there's more. There is much, much more of benefits of code review. And there's plenty of studies to say that code review is actually much better at finding bugs than any of our QA that we do, which is an interesting thing to consider. So now, how do you guys do code review? Can someone not from the UCreate side share how you do code review?
I generally go file by file and just see if I have to approve a request, and I just...
Okay, so you've got pull requests in your GitHub flow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how it usually works. We start the sprint, it's Monday morning, a developer picks up a story and he says, okay, I commit to do it in the next 2 weeks. Then he starts working. Then on day 1 to day 9, he creates his branch and he starts coding. He codes on his local machine and the local environment. Nobody can see that, it's his. Every single day, during the stand-up, he says, I'm doing great. It's really good progress. You can't see it yet, it's on my machine, but it's getting well. And then he kind of reports this very positive outcome on the stand-up meeting, and he just do things with the code. On last day of the sprint, he kind of finish everything off, hopes for the best, create what we call a pull request, which is a signal for the rest of the team, or usually to the senior developer, to start doing the code review. And it should start the conversation. Senior developer then should take all of this code, and it could be 500 lines of code, review it, and give his feedback. The idea is that you can find plenty of challenges within that code, and you can help within it. Most of the senior developers just say, looks good to me. LGTM, that's an acronym from Google that they just use to just say, oh, it looks good to me. Then the developer does some small changes to the branch. Then he hopes for the best. He merges his code into the normal GitHub, to the GitHub master, and he sends all of this to the QA. Then it's Friday, or the last day. He starts praying that everything is going to be fine and that no bugs that the senior developer should find were found. And then he hopes that there will be no feedback from anybody else, because actually he wasn't very confident about what he built. The senior developer didn't really have much time to review it. So that's a caricature of this process, and there is lots of people who are doing this relatively well, but that's how it usually looks like. The developer hides behind the branch during the whole sprint, and he is never visible with his code. There's no way to give him feedback because it kind of works on his machine. On the last day of the sprint, a senior developer in the organization gets 2,000 lines of code to review, so he just says, yeah, it looks good. So it's not a real review. And usually the bottleneck is the senior developers, who are, in most organizations, the only people who can actually review code. So let's see how it's done in practice. And I will try to play that. So I will stop, and it's going to remove the joke. But those are all of the test-driven development tests that the developer runs against his code on his machine to make sure that everything works. One of those tests failed. So what the normal developer should do? Fix it. Okay? Shit.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
So that's a senior developer. He works from home. He's not with the junior. No point. He's working from home.
I have no idea what I'm reading.
That's it. So that's again the kind of show how in most of organizations the code review happens. Neither the junior really made a great job, nor the senior really spent a lot of time trying to figure it out. So when we are doing the code review, or when we are thinking about the code review, it's like when you're reviewing 10 lines of code, or you're reviewing something very, very small that fits in your head, you will find 10 issues. When you're reviewing 500 lines of code, you kind of say it looks fine. Your cognitive load is not enough to capture actually what is going on. So that's a great tweet to explain why code reviews currently doesn't really work. So those developers that you've seen on the video, they felt very productive. They could do a lot of code by removing the tests and a lot of reviews by just saying, looks good to me, but they were not very effective in kind of making the impact on the business. Nobody really knows what just got merged into the code base. So what do we do? And it's going to be an interesting thing because there's plenty of people in the room that actually do it on a daily basis. So when we started UCreate, we had a little bit different objective than all of the reasons why code reviewers were doing when it comes to improving the code quality and so on. We wanted developers to talk about code. That was almost our first objective. Like when I was developer, and that was really ages ago, and I'm probably the worst developer in this room, I really enjoy conversations around water cooler in the kitchen purely about code. And we've got a distributed team in Poland, Wales, India at this moment. We wanted all of them to talk. So that was one of our objectives. We kind of had the intuition that creating a high quality, very, very small batches of code will enable us to do this beautiful innovation within how we develop software. So anything from DevOps or anything about user research or anything about building MVP or feature flags, any of those big keywords that you hear and you will hear during this conference today were kind of blocked by the fact that we were not really building a great code on its own right. So we thought that by fixing our code, we'll be able to enable those innovations to happen. How many of you know this book? Goldratt, The Goal. So this is another guy that a decent percentage of your Agile stuff sits on his shoulders. So he's the creator of Theory of Constraints, and that was still ages ago, and this is all of the things about the bottlenecks, how we manage certain processes, how we manage the flow. He is crucial. If you can read just one book after this conference, read that. It's like a business novel. It tells a story about running a factory, which doesn't make sense for the software delivery, but it actually makes a lot of sense. And he talks about small batches, easier to control risk, delivery just in time, and you've got much more abilities when you do that like this. And we as the company, we wanted to be obsessed about the quality. How many of you knows this picture? Do you know what's that? The line over there?
Production line.
Yeah, okay, so that's the production line producing cars. What's the yellow thing?
They're pulling it if there is a fault that
Correct.
is found in the
Correct.
process.
Correct. So a Toyota production system is very famous for the fact that every single employee at any point of time, when he or she notices something wrong, they just pull this cord and the whole factory stops. Can you imagine this? Any employee at any point of time can just stop the whole Toyota factory producing cars. And we thought of quality in that kind of a way, and we will come back to that, why certain things works in a certain way for us. So what did we do? Well, we stopped using branches. We kind of never really had them, but we definitely stopped. We review each and every single commit that we do, and every single line of code in that commit. So instead of having senior developer just scrolling through, we review every single line. And as you can imagine, what happened was, let's see if it works.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
So that's the American version of the Office. Everyone said no. Our senior developers, including the guys who are sitting here, said, we don't want it, we love our branches. Every single person in Poland said, no, this is not how it's going to work, we don't want it. But we are a company full of courage and bravery, so we thought, okay, let's do it. Well, the other thing that we dramatically changed, we said, you know what? The whole idea of just seniors reviewing the code is fundamentally wrong, which means as you create, every single person reviews code. Juniors reviews code, the people who are assigned to their project. They might be assigned to a different project to help out. Seniors reviews everybody's code. Why? Because juniors can look at the senior developer code and say, hey, why did you do it? And in most cases, the senior would say, oh, I don't really know, I can do better. And that's the way they learn. And for the seniors, it's an opportunity to actually be able to explain why they did what they did. And the juniors, basically speaking, learn. So at our company, everybody constantly reviews code on both sides, no matter your role and no matter your position. This is our definition of code review. We do it carefully, and we create a time for you to do it well, and we do it systematically, which means every single day we review our code. And instead of every 2 weeks or every month when we were having branches. We also define what good looks like. One of the reasons why the code review dramatically fails is that people don't know what they're looking for. Like, you look at 5,000 lines of code of someone's code and you say like, okay, that looks okay. I can move a space here or there, but I don't really know what I'm looking for. So, as soon as our developer sees a relatively small piece of code, because it's just one commit, it's not a big branch, the first question that they should ask is, do I understand the code that I'm seeing? If the answer is no, they've got the right to reject it. Which means if you cannot read the code and say, oh, I get it, we reject the code as well, it's poorly written. And then we started extremely simply. We started the code review by having correct naming conventions. Okay, let's name the things in the way we can all read them properly. Let's put dry, which means if you see that someone did copy-paste the same line 25 times in the same file, I'm waving at you guys, yeah, just reject that code. When we see that we've got a certain style of coding, tabs versus spaces, caps lock versus something else, let's just keep it consistent. And let's follow the frameworks. Let's just not pull SQL into the views files. Like, let's just do the basics. And that's how we started. That was our beginning of our code review process. It wasn't having mind-blowing abilities to find out if the architecture of what we are building is correct. It was just the simple things that makes the biggest impact for what we're doing. And we also strongly consider the idea which is propagated by the architecture of microservices and the people who are saying, I cannot reason about anything if it doesn't fit into my code. And we're going to run a quick experiment. How many of you watch Young Yoda? No? No? Okay, so that's the... okay, sorry. So let me play you a video, and I want you to really focus on what's going to be played. So that's probably the most important text in the history of 10 minutes. Okay. So please read it. Think about that you are the reviewer of this text. Okay, read it? Everything clear? What was written in the line 4? Anybody?
It's just a guess. It's time for a civil war?
No, I think it's Wonder First Victory.
Okay.
But actually, this is what you're expecting from your developers when they are reviewing code. They are scrolling, something has already disappeared, but you're asking them to remember what was the name of the function that they just called and what it was doing. And you had all the time in the world that was fun to read, and you still dramatically failed on how it's going. So we created what we consider is what fits in your head, which means our commit has to be the size of, basically speaking, Yoda's head. If they don't fit into the screen, they're too big, and you've got the ability to reject them. The next thing we introduced was, and most of the code reviews all over the world are failing because the people thinking that you're reviewing them rather than reviewing their work. So people don't want to be reviewed because if you say, hey, your code is not great, they take offense like it was about them. It's not. It's about their work, it's about their code, and we all want to improve. So we started working with our developers to consider how we are going to do it, and we build the processes around it, how to be nice and respectful to each other. Well, we went live, we built a beautiful tool that is now called Reviewee, and nothing happened. So basically speaking, we were having this tool which was supposed to be used for code review and nobody was doing it. Well, it is really because we haven't changed their thinking. Our developers still didn't like the code review and they didn't want to change the behavior. So we smart people thought, okay, let's change their behavior to change their thinking. So what we did, we used that, which means every single time there is a commit rejected at uCreate for whatever reason, we stop everything. Which means from that moment, you cannot deploy to staging, you cannot deploy to production, you should really stop coding any new stuff, and you should fix what has been rejected. And that has been the biggest change we've ever made within the company, forcing people to stop when the quality of anything that we believe should be fixed is just not there. How did it impact our organization? Well, those are funny enough. I asked yesterday for the stats. So in November 2017, when we released our first version, we accepted 2,219 commits and we rejected 1,593. Today, we accepted roughly the same number, but out of those, we rejected only 157. Like, I think there are some, like, I think the data is not perfect yet, but I roughly see that. I will tell you why. Because when we started, I was doing most of the rejections, and every single time the code was rejected, I was getting an email. Which means when India starts at 5 a.m. in the morning here, I was getting 200 emails with the rejections reasons. That's that, right? At this moment, I get much less, which is quite nice. We introduced trunk-based development. How many of you know trunk-based development? Okay, that's really cool. So we commit every single commit to the master rather than creating the branches, and that's how we do it. Google does it for, if someone tells you that it cannot be done, Google does it for 35,000 developers and QA. Like, it can be done. The idea that it has to be on the branches on GitHub is just fundamentally wrong. It has been recommended by a huge amount of people who are doing a great research within how to building high-performing tech organizations, and it fits really, really well into your DevOps model, because the smallest commit is the thing that you can actually deploy and push. We introduced feature flags. How many of you knows about feature flags? So we push the code to production, but it's hidden from the users. That's what Facebook did. Facebook ran Messenger within your browser for years before it actually showed it to you. It was always there, it was just hidden from you. We finally started using our coding guidelines, which were just dead documentation previously, and now you can reject the code linking to the coding guidelines. That's how we started reading that. Previously, nobody went to see them, somehow. We've got much easier DevOps. We can deploy multiple times a day. Every single commit can go to live. We're very happy about it. We've got I've got 5 minutes. We've got much quicker feedback from everybody. That includes the PMs can see the code, the quality assurance people can see the code, and actual things that are working. If someone needs help after 2 days of not pushing anything, we can react, we can help. We can do something about it rather than being constantly hidden behind the branch. So, like, if you've got something bad to say during the stand-up that you're struggling, you can actually say that, or we actually know. So, you hiding is just not a great idea. We introduced something called focus time. If we want people to be really focused on doing code reviews great, well, from, I don't know, 9 o'clock India time till your lunchtime, 1:30, there are no meetings, nobody shouts, it's your time to code and do the code review. Like, nothing happens that you create during those hours. After that, yeah, they play snooker and stuff like that, yeah. Well, we start, oh, sorry. That's me. We started to see mentors and teachers showing up. Our developers start sharing feedback with each other. They start helping other people become better developers. The developers who are very, very shy started asking questions. Well, they will be leaders soon. Today, this is just the way for them to become more confident in the ability to speak up, to share their knowledge, to be the part of that team. Well, in the past, when I used to code as well, they just loved rejecting my code. and I'm probably the worst developers that we've got at this moment, which is great, but that was quite fun to be rejected. It's part of our DNA. Like every single person in our organizations knows about how we do code review, and it's part of it. There is no going back. Everybody supports it. There is no question about it, and that's why I think it works. It also allows us to easier introduce new quality initiatives. So when we want to improve performance, we've got a policy to do it. We've got policy called zero bug policy, which means every single bug that you create should be fixed straight away. It's because of the code review and the trust that we gain, we could do other things to be non-productive, but very, very effective in what we do. In the history of this company, we never did a big rewrite. We changed technologies. We went from monolith to API-driven architecture, but no one has ever said, oh, this code is rubbish. Let's write it again. Why? Because we do hundreds of rewrites every single bloody day, which means we're never in a position that someone has to say, wow, I can't work with it. This is from the past, but within 1 hour, that's from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, we found, discussed, and fixed 9 code challenges. I've got no idea what those things are, but that happens within 1 hour within all of the projects that you create. 9 things being fixed, 9 things being improved. I think that's a decent number, no matter how your organization operates. Well, what was the impact on the team members? And you got the guys here to ask them. Well, we started talking. People started writing essays about code and why things works and why things doesn't work and what was the reasoning behind that. Well, we learned how to praise and give feedback. It's like 4 lines of code, that's a perfect commit for us. Removing 3, adding 1, good job. Fine, spot on. We care about big and small things. Spelling mistake, oops, that's been too. So we care about as tiny things as that. Why? Because if you leave those things in your code, it's going to get worse and worse. We learn to say thanks. Some comment, sure, thanks. That's it. It's actually ability to say, you're not criticizing me, you're just actually helping me to become a better developer. So our developers now say thanks, which is an interesting thing. We started to be curious. You see a piece of code, you don't know what it does. Hey, does your code do this, or does it do that? Maybe you should consider this. We start having conversations about code just because we've got the time and ability to actually do it. And we talk some more. Before you comment, I know it's bad and I'm sorry. It was a stupid mistake of mine to do a push force. We get that a lot. So our developers are fully aware that whatever they did, they cannot hide it anymore. So they start apologizing before it actually happens. I really like you notice this thing. It appreciated and many things. Like, we like our developers now much more. They talk like this to each other, or at least I hope. And that's from, we want to be right. This is Amazon being right or being nice. Time is up, okay? You're right, thanks for being stubborn. We want to do the correct things. We learn how to explain why, so we write now essays about the code, and it feels good. Yes, Pavel, we understand that, yes, it feels good to go home on time. That's how it changed our organization. Team protects reviewee and hates when we don't have it. We are not very productive, but we are very impactful. 2 minutes? Can I have 2 minutes? 2, okay. 1, okay. So what can you do on Monday? Well, read more. Those are the books that are the basic introductions to all of the concepts that we talk. The Go, the Accelerate, how to build the highly performing organizations, the Unicorn projects and the Phoenix project. Trunk-based development, listen and follow Dan North, and follow the ThoughtWorks. Those are great examples. Stop thinking of being productive, make an impact. Thank you.
So guys, we have Pawel over here, so you can ask questions as we are out of time, so we won't allow any questions as of now. So you can ask him, he's here, you can ask him, you can catch hold of him anytime.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pawel. It was nice having you.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just a second.
Oh.
Okay, look at this. Wait.
Thank you.
And guys,